Ah, this is okay. Oh, okay, it's time to begin. All right, so here is the attendance sheet. So our goal for the day is to justify the meaning semi-simple Lie algebra by proving this semi-simplicity theorem and strong uniqueness properties. It will take a little bit of time to get there. And let's try to call the rest of the people if they are. Okay, we are beginning. Okay, so the goal is a basic theorem about semi-simple Lie algebras, that they really look like how semi-simple objects should, namely sum of simple objects. The basic tool that we will need to get there is a bilinear form on L, which is called the Killing form, and a criterion about solvability. So let's get started. So this is the definition of semi-simple Lie algebras, and from there we have to get there. So let's recall the definition. Semi-simple means that it has no solvable ideals. In other words, the radical, which is defined to be the maximal solvable ideal, there is a unique one, that is equal to 0. Okay. Let me make just one simple observation right away. This is the same as saying L has no abelian ideals, and let us see this. So, if L has no solvable ideals, it certainly cannot have an abelian ideal either, right, because an abelian ideal is certainly solvable, correct. But why is the converse true? That is, if L has no abelian ideals, then why cannot it have a solvable ideal either? Why? I am sorry? Correct. So, we look at the look at the contrapositive. If you do have a solvable ideal, then that means if you take its derived series, eventually it will die. Look at the term just before it becomes 0, that will be an ideal, and its commutator is 0. That means that ideal was a solvable an abelian ideal. So, this is a useful thing. Our basic tool is going to be a bilinear form. So, let us define that. So, the killing form on L is kappa, but my kappas will look as k's, x, y. This by definition is the trace of add x, add y. So, add x, add y is an operator which acts on L, correct. So, this takes two elements of L and assigns it to it a scalar. Okay. So, basic properties, let us start here. Alright, so what are the things that jump out that are obvious? This is the trace of a product of linear operators. So, this is certainly a bilinear form. Is it symmetric? Yes, because trace of AB is trace of BA. So, this is a symmetric bilinear form. Symmetric and of course bilinear form. What else? So, it has this nice property that it is associative. And associative in what sense? K of, if you take the bracket of x and y, z, that is the same thing as K of x with, this is a matter of just calculation. So, let us just see how this goes, and I will do this as a rough calculation, because strictly speaking what do I have to do? So, let us write this down. This is going to be the trace of something, namely trace of add of this times add of that. Now, this multiplication is just composition of operators. So, add of x bracket y add z, but then add of x bracket y is add x add y minus add y add x. So, it is going to have two terms, each one a product of three things, but I want to just write it as x y z, which is wrong, correct, but I do not want to keep writing add in front of everything. So, it will look like x y z minus y x z. I should really, okay, I will just put primes, so that prime is add. And whereas what about this one? That is going to be the trace of x y z minus x z y. So, is it clear that both of these have the same trace? These two terms are the same. So, I just have to check that these two have the same trace, and so what do? I just look at x z. So, this is a straightforward thing. But this has an interesting consequence that we will come to. Notice one more thing. This is a completely elementary observation. If you have a vector space V and a subspace W, which is a subspace, let us suppose you have some operator f which is from V to W. In particular, it will map W also to W, right? So look at this operator F and look at the operator F restricted to W. What can you say about the trace of these two operators? They are on different spaces, right? They are different operators. But just think of the matrix. When you write down the matrix of F, take a basis of W and complete it, you will see that the trace of these two is the same. Is that clear? So I will just say trace of F is trace of F. So remark. This remark has the following implication for us. Let's say if I an ideal of L, and let's say that I take X and Y both in I. Now you see that if I want to calculate the killing form of X and Y, then it could conceivably have two meanings. Right? The way I have written it, I think of X and Y as elements of L, take the operators add X and add Y acting on L, calculate the product and take the trace. Or I could think of add X and add Y as operators on the Lie algebra I itself, calculate their product and calculate the trace on I. Okay. So if I say K sub L and K sub I of X, Y, what that observation shows over there is that because it's an ideal, add X and add Y, in fact I can say something more than this. Let's just take this a little bit further. First of all, this is clear, right? Let's just write this down and see what we can say. So if I take X in L and Y in I, then what can I say about add X, add Y? I can do it the other way also. Okay. So this operator first starts with L and then it maps within. The first step, it takes me in I, and the next step takes me still in I, right? Because X is in L, it doesn't matter. If I swap, you will still get the same thing, correct? So in fact what I can say is that if I calculate the trace of add X, add Y in this more general situation where one of the operators is from I and the other operator is from L, I can calculate the trace either on Y, either on I or on L. I will still get the same thing. Okay. But in fact, if X and Y are both in I, then what can I say? Add X, add Y. This will take L into where? I can say a little bit more here. So the first step will take L to I, and then it will take me to the bracket of I with itself, correct? For example, if I were an abelian ideal, then this would give me something, right? So I will use this point. But the basic issue is the following, that from now on, if I want to calculate the killing form of two things, and if they are both within an ideal, then I will not worry about whether the killing form is of that ideal or of the Lie algebra. I am just going to write kappa of x, y without worrying about where I am calculating it, because it does not make a difference. So why am I doing this? So 4. If L is nilpotent, what can you say about this killing form? It's a nilpotent Lie algebra. Let's recall what that means. That means if you keep adding by elements, in fact an arbitrary chain, as long as you take add by enough number of elements, it will be 0 after a fixed number of steps. Okay. So, let us look at this k x y. What this means is I have to take the operator add x add y and take its trace. Now, do you know something about the operator add x add y? They are nilpotent operators. That is a consequence, right? Because if I do this operator enough number of times, I will pick up enough adds. So, this is a nilpotent operator, so its trace is 0. So, in fact, in this case the killing form is 0, correct? It is identically 0. And now we come to the reason why I am considering the killing form. See, I started out by giving a title of semi-simplicity. I am talking about solvability or things like that. But semi-simplicity means there is no solvable ideal. So, somehow I need to detect the presence of solvable ideals. And I am going to detect that, I am going to use this a kind of trace criterion to check whether something is solvable or not. So, let us say L is a linear Lie algebra. If L is solvable, then you have for all x in L and y in the derived algebra. So, this is an exercise in the book that we will do. The key point here and the theorem which I will not prove is that so this is the theorem of Cartan. It's Cartan's criterion of solvability, which says that if you take a Lie algebra, you calculate its killing form, and if it vanishes when x is in L and y is in the derived algebra, then your Lie algebra is solvable. Okay. The reason why I am not doing it is because I can follow the proof, but I cannot really add any insight to it. If I think of something, then later on I will talk about it. This is a very powerful criterion, and essentially we will see that this is exactly the tool that we will need to go over there to get the result that we want. So, one more thing, we have done one example, another example for exercises, some calculation. So, let us try to do this for SL2, calculate K. So, what does it mean to calculate a form? It is a bilinear form. So, I just need to give it for a basis vector. So, that will be a matrix. What will be the size of that matrix? It will be a 3 by 3 matrix. So, I have to calculate what happens when I take basis x, h, y, x, h, y and calculate this. Let us at least just begin this calculation. We are not going to do the entire thing, but you should do this for yourself. This is one of the calculations that you must do. Another calculation that you must do for yourself is what was on Anupam's exercise sheet yesterday, where it asks you to show that a certain element of the universal enveloping algebra of SL2 is in the center. That is a calculation that you must do. So, how do I calculate this? So, the entry over here, for instance, is going to be the trace of the square of the operator add x. So, I have to know what add x does. So, let us write down what add x is. Add x. I am not going to write down the entire matrix because there are lots of, let us just write down. So, add x sends x to, there are lots of zeros there, right, h to So those equations with x, h and y, they must be etched in your mind. Sorry about that, but I mean, you should not have to think about it. It should be like 2 plus 2 equals 4. So this is bracket of x with h, which is minus of bracket of h with x, and we know that that is 2x. So this is minus 2x, and y will go to h. So you have to write 3 such things, and then you have to compose them and get the form. The answer is given in the book, which I will copy. I think it is in this order, but please check. And the rest are 0. So what is the purpose of this exercise? C times h. Then you are forced to include everything. Okay. Just keep acting by elements x, y, h, and so it is simple. This is something you can check by hand. So it has no ideals. Forget any solvable ideals. So in particular, it is semi-simple, and you can see that its Killing form is non-degenerate. This matrix has non-zero determinant, right? So we Vishwanath talked about forms and non-degeneracy. This matrix is the one that gives you the map from V to. If you have a bilinear form on a vector space V, then this matrix is the one that gives you the map from V to V star. Non-degeneracy of the form means that that map is an isomorphism which can be detected by invertibility of the determinant. So over a field that's just non-zero. So you see that the Killing form is non-degenerate. So the theorem that we want to prove is the following. So this is prior to, so complete this. L is semi-simple if and only if the Killing form is non-degenerate. So, okay, I'll make a definition here, proof. So, the radical of the form, the radical of Killing form, this word, this usage of the word radical is completely different from the radical of the Lie algebra itself. Okay. So, radical of the form Killing form K, I will call that S. So this by definition is all those things which, this is a standard definition, does anybody know? Everything on your, the radical of a form is everything in your vector space whose form with everything else is 0. So this is X in L such that kappa of x, y equals 0 for all y in L. And the first thing to note here is that this S, so non-degeneracy of the Killing form means that S is 0, and semi-simplicity of the Lie algebra means its radical is 0. So wouldn't it be nice if those two radicals were the same, but they are not. Nonetheless, there is a nice relationship between them which is enough to, but the first thing to observe is that this radical, just by, if you just take a vector space and if you take, and with a bilinear form and you take a radical, it's going to be a subspace by bilinearity of the form. But here it is more than that. This radical is actually an ideal. Why is that? So let's check if x is in S implies xz, okay, xy is also in S, and this is just a note. Why is that? So this is just because how do I check if something is in S? I take its k with an arbitrary element, but that's really the same thing as k of x with the bracket of y and z. But the bracket, kappa of x with everything is 0. So therefore, S is an ideal. So we will try to find out the relationship between the radical of the form, namely S, and radical of, let R, radical of L. So we will show two things. We will show that every abelian ideal, so claim, might as well write the whole thing, that S is contained in the radical of L, but the radical may strictly be actually bigger, and there is an example in the exercise to that effect. But actually what S will contain, for fairly easy reasons, is every abelian ideal. So any abelian ideal I of L. So why is that? Let us try to prove this. So let's prove the first thing. Say I an abelian ideal. I want to show that this ideal is contained in the radical of the form. And what does that mean? Means I have to take an element of I and check if it is in the radical. In other words, calculate the form of that element with an arbitrary element of the Lie algebra. So let us take x in I and an arbitrary y in L, and I have to calculate k of x and y, which, recall, is just the trace of the following operator: add x, add y. So let us look at this operator closely. I need to show that this trace is 0, and wouldn't it be nice if the operator were nilpotent? So let us check. So I start with L, and let us look at add x, add y. So y is an arbitrary element of the Lie algebra, so I do not know anything where it takes, so it will go to L, but afterwards this add x will take me into I. You recall that calculation that we did over there. So that's the result of add x, add y. The next application of add x, add y will take me to, so the next application, so therefore add x, add y square itself is an operator that will take me from L to the bracket of I with itself, which is, so that is a nilpotent operator. Equals 0. So this is the calculation, because add x, add y is nilpotent. This was the easy part of the proof. Okay. The other part is also easy, simply because I have said here is the hammer, just use it. But let us see how to use that. Okay, by the way, I did not say one thing. I just made this statement, but let us see why this finishes the proof. Do you see that if I prove this, I have proved one half of this claim, namely this containment. And after I do this containment also, the result is completely proved. Do you see that? If the form is non-degenerate, that means that its radical is 0, so S is 0, and therefore L cannot contain any abelian ideal, and therefore it cannot contain any solvable ideal, and so the radical is 0, so it's semi-simple. And the other thing is more straightforward. If the radical of the Lie algebra itself is 0, then the radical of the form is also 0, because it's always contained in it, and so the form is non-degenerate. So this will complete the proof. So let's do the other part of the claim. And there is almost nothing to say. Why is that? I want to show that S is contained in the radical, that is the same radical of the Lie algebra, which is the largest solvable ideal. I already know that S is an ideal, so the only thing that I need to show is that S is solvable. So it will be contained in the largest one. Well, why is S a solvable ideal? I have a criterion which tells me exactly when something is solvable, and that is indeed a trace criterion. Okay. So what does it? So need to show for S in rad L, need to show S is solvable. But let's see what that means. To show that something is solvable, I have to show that the killing form is 0 when, so I'll just copy this. See, since we do not really have an understanding of this, let's just copy it symbolically. So what does this mean? I need to show that k of x y is 0 for x in S and y in, I am just copying from there. But in fact, what do we have? In fact, we have this whenever x, and notice one thing, I'm deliberately but justifiably confusing the killing form on S with the killing form on L, but I have already justified that, it does not really matter. So I am just going to write kappa. So k of x y is supposed to be 0 for x in here and y in here, but in fact I have that when x is in S and y is anything in L, because when x is in the radical of the form, the killing form dies for an arbitrary element. So in fact I have much more than this. So I will just write this, and that is the end of the proof. But it really is, I mean, I should say that this is the hardest part and we have not done the proof of this. I can do the proof, but the proof seems removed from the considerations at hand. The key thing though in the proof is Jordan decomposition, and you really need the full strength of Jordan decomposition as quoted in the book. So perhaps we will do this another time, but I want to go on and prove this theorem. Okay. So proof of this theorem. So you recall the proof of Maschke's theorem, complete reducibility. What is the idea? You want to show that something can be written as direct sum of simple things, but you don't start by a simple thing. You say that you take any sub-object and you try to show that it has a complement. Complement with respect to what? Complement in terms of direct sum, but how does this complement come about? you put some kind of form on it, right? So we will try to follow the same thing. And what are we going to use? We are going to use the killing form. So, and once you have this idea, then the proof just writes itself out. So first statement. So instead of showing this, I will take an arbitrary ideal here, and I will show that it has a complement. Okay. So first a simple note here. Note. So L is a Lie algebra, and let's suppose that I and J are ideals such that L is as a vector space. This is a completely straightforward point, but I want to. That means that these two are ideals, they are also vector subspaces. All that I mean by this is that they span the whole thing and their intersection is 0. If this is the case, then actually what will be the bracket? Let's just see. What will be the bracket? So I take something in here. So everything in L can be written as A comma B, correct? So let's take A prime in I, B prime in J. So what will be the bracket of A comma B with A prime comma B prime? If this seems complicated, it's just because the notation has I am doing this on my feet without. There is something very simple is going on here. See, if I take, or let's even forget this. Anything in L can be written as A plus B, right? If I take the bracket of these two things, strictly speaking, there are going to be 4 terms when you distribute. But actually, what is going to happen? When I take the bracket of anything in I with anything in J, it is going to lie both in I and in J because they are both ideals. But their intersection is 0 just because this is a direct sum. So in particular, what happens? Just the fact that that this is a direct sum of ideals as vector spaces forces that the bracket is also defined component wise. So I could in turn say that just look at the Lie bracket on I, look at the Lie bracket on J, and Lie bracket of any two elements of L is simply obtained by the Lie bracket in the respective coordinates. Right. Is this clear? This is a very simple point. So this direct sum, you can think of this direct sum either in terms of vector spaces or as Lie algebras. It's the same. That is the point. Okay. And so if I take I, an ideal of L, and by this little business, all I need to do is to find an ideal which is complementary as a vector space. It must be an ideal, but it must be complementary as a vector space, and automatically the Lie algebra will be a direct sum of those two ideals with the Lie algebra structure completely determined by the Lie algebra structure under two ideals. Okay. So how do I define I perpendicular? I define the perpendicular subspace with respect to the killing form. So where did I keep my notes? I'll stick to the notation that I have here. X in L such that x, y is 0 for all y in I. Okay. So what do I need to show? Look, I want to show that, let's look ahead. How do I want to conclude the proof? I want to show that First, that it's an ideal, and two, there so the Lie algebra is their direct sum. So okay, that means really that the sum is the whole thing and the intersection is 0, but here I actually need only one. Okay, the intersection is 0. Why will this mean that it will span the whole thing? Because the form is, remember, the Lie algebra is semi-simple, so the form is non-degenerate, and that means that the perpendicular subspace has complementary dimension and there is no intersection, so it will span the whole thing. So I need to show that the intersection is 0, and I need to show that that this is an ideal. Once I do that, then okay, so then let's just lay it out. Then I perp is an ideal and I intersection equals 0. Both these things will mean that together will mean that this. So I have to say y and y. But let's press on and complete the outline of the proof. If that is the case, then how do I complete the proof? Induction on the dimension. But for that I need to observe that I and I perp that they themselves are, if I want to apply induction to that, then I need to show that these are themselves semi-simple. Is that clear? Now why? Is it in general true that so the definition of form, but is it, let's go to the definition. Is it true that an ideal of an ideal is an ideal of the whole Lie algebra in general? No, but here it is true because the Lie algebra structure itself splits, right? There is no interaction between these two. So if you take an ideal of this ideal, it will be an ideal in the whole Lie algebra. It will certainly absorb multiplication from here, and multiplication by this part is 0. So once we prove this, I know that I and by the same token the perpendicular one, they are both semi-simple, and so they can be written as direct sum of simples. So this is the usual kind of. So let's do this. So the perpendicular thing is an ideal. Is that clear? Why? Because of, again, associativity. Right? And why is this the case? No, now you will have to explain to me why. By non-degeneracy, so? So we have to use the Cartan criterion once again. So let's lay it out by Cartan. Why? Applied to what? See, if I apply it to this intersection, it is an ideal, correct? And what do we know about, see, what we know is that if x is, let's just write it, if x is in I and y is in I perpendicular, then, correct? In particular, if I take both of these in the intersection, the killing form is 0, right? And again, it does not matter whether I evaluate it on L or I perpendicular or their intersection. And so by Cartan's criterion, this is a solvable Lie algebra and it's an ideal. So it would be a solvable ideal. Okay. So this is also okay, and so we get this by induction. I and I sum of simple ideals, and I will just say of L, just to say that ideals of I and ideals of, that they are both semi-simple. I should really write that, but I just indicate it by that phrase. So we are done with the first proof. Okay, so Now the second one, and here it gets even better than representation theory, right? Is it true that if a representation is completely reducible, then the irreducible constituents are themselves determined as vector subspaces? Is that true? Certainly not, right? You just think of a vector space as a representation of the trivial group. You can write it as direct sum of lines, but those lines are very far from being unique. Whereas over here, see what it's saying, that these LIs themselves are unique. I am not saying up to isomorphism, they are unique on the nose. So let us see why. So take I to be any simple ideal of L, and I need to show that I is one of these L sub i's. So what will I do? I have this equation, no? So somehow I want to use this equation with I. So what will I do? I can see, I can all right. Question: if V is equal to A direct sum B, then is it true that a subspace here W is direct sum of W intersection A plus W intersection B? Certainly not, right? So I cannot. You just think of A and B like that and W to be. So we can't. But instead of intersection, we can do something which is sort of like that, which will work better than, see, it's a set theoretic thing. But I can instead take a bracket, and let us see that that is also okay, because that one didn't work out, right? So let's look at I L. Okay, so what do we know about this? Let's gather various things. First of all, what sort of thing is it? It's an ideal. It's an ideal of L, but in fact it sits in I, because its bracket with I itself is an ideal, right? So this is an ideal, and it's in I. I was simple, remember, as a Lie algebra. And this is an ideal of L, so it's an ideal of I also. I was simple, so the only possibilities are, this is either 0 or all of. Why can't it be 0? So what? But a little more to say there. What would it mean that if this were 0? So of course I am taking a non-zero. Simple means non-zero, nor one dimensional. So what would be, if this were 0, what would that mean? That I is right. So abelian will not do, but it's in the center because it commutes with all of L. But if the Lie algebra has a center, the center is certainly an ideal and an abelian ideal, in fact, I mean, certainly solvable. So this is not 0. I not equal to 0 because Z of L is not is 0. Otherwise Z of L would not be 0. And so on the one hand, therefore this has to equal I. On the other hand, if we hit it with this, then what happens? So I L1 some L2 what can I say about this? I can distribute. Why can I distribute? Oh, I'm blanking out here, but let's see. I want to say, so is it true that this will be the direct sum of, so question mark, but I think we probably need something more here, no? So just help me out here. Is that true? Is that always true? I think here we probably need the fact that this is direct sum as Lie algebras. Isn't that the case? That there are no cross contributions to the bracket. Do we need that or not? So just think about it and tell me, because I am blanking out. The fact that this sum is direct is not a problem, but the point is, why do I get everything in this fashion? Remember, even for the intersection the problem was the same. The sum would be direct, but you might just not recover everything. Okay, but here I think it's not a problem.
I don't think you need the interaction because it's linear measurement. It will be better related to the I.
Okay. Yes, correct, exactly. So let me just write down what he said. If I take something in I, which is called, let's just call it A, and don't think, I mean, this is a sum of things, right? So when you take the bracket, it just distributes, and so you can visibly write A, the bracket of A with anything in here, as a sum of brackets of this type. So good. So this is fine, but where does this lead us? So this I, remember we are talking about this single object which was shown to be the ideal I, which was simple, is now a direct sum of these ideals, and therefore I must equal one of them and all the others must be 0. There is no other way. So one of these, say I L sub k, and we are almost there now. We just have to say one or two things. If so, I equals the bracket of I with L sub k, but what do I know about this bracket? That is contained in I, that is true, but it is contained in L sub k because L sub k is also an ideal, and now L sub k is simple and I is contained in that, therefore they must equal. So how about the third one? Is that now clear? Therefore I equals L sub k. So all ideals are of this type. Why is that? We just have to say some things. There is no calculation to be done, but we just have to say it. So let's take any ideal. Really the same thing. So we can either prove this directly or we can prove this whichever way. But so why is that? If I is, see, if you take an ideal I, then we can repeat the proof of the first one if you want, and the whole L is I direct sum I perpendicular. Each one of these is a direct sum of simples, and an ideal of L, an ideal of I is an ideal in L again because it splits up. We have shown uniqueness of the ideals of L, so only some of those must occur in I. In particular, semi-simple, and then the next one also becomes clear, right? Because if you take a quotient by anything, you are killing off some of the simple things. So whatever is left over, that will be the quotient, and so it's semi-simple. Okay. So is this okay?
I equal to, I comma that L.
Okay, you want to do a calculation? Yes, because this calculation did not depend on I being anything, right? This would still be true. So now each one of these will be contained in, correct. So that's a straightforward. Do you see what he's saying?
No, but I comma L will not be equal to I. I need not be equal to L.
No, but it is contained in.
So that shows that Li is a direct sum of Li's. L into I may not be equal to bracket I.
Correct. When you take the bracket, it may not equal. Correct. So yes. So it will show that this equals. Okay. So it doesn't quite get you all the way there, but So 3, just say check. So very nice and very fundamental theorem. So where do we go from here? Let's talk about Jordan decompositions. What about converse of 4? That if the killing form is identically 0 is the Lie algebra. So I'll just ask the question here. I don't know the answer to that. So something to think about. So I can take Jordan decomposition of an operator, correct? If I take an arbitrary element of a Lie algebra, it's not an operator, it's just an abstract thing sitting somewhere. So if I want to take its Jordan decomposition, I want to see it as an operator. Now can I think of it as an operator? Does an arbitrary element of a Lie algebra act on something as an operator? So it acts on representations. Of course, you can take any representation, and this is an important point that will be discussed, but in particular we can take the adjoint representation, that's the God given representation. So there it's an operator, and there I can take its Jordan decomposition and I somehow want to pull it back. What are the problems with this idea? The first problem is that when you pass to add, there could be a kernel, and then what do you do, right? So this is a real problem. The kernel is precisely the center. So in case we have a semi-simple Lie algebra, this problem is not there, right? So let's write this down. So L to add L, and this is 1 to 1. Okay. Okay. But there is a problem now, right? That if I have, so if I take something in here, I take add of that, add x. Add x will have a semi-simple part and add x will have a nilpotent part. But why should they be add of something, right? I want to pull this back to the. So do you know of some situation, I mean it was an exercise where in some case the semi-simple and nilpotent part of a certain kind of operator is also that kind of operator, right? So derivation. So somehow I want to think of this as derivations. Now these are all derivations, right? That's Jacobi identity, remember. These are all derivations of L, but there could be more. So this is a theorem that there are no more. Remember another one of exercises which showed that these derivations, so we call them what? Inner derivations, right? That these inner derivations in the algebra of all derivations, they form an ideal, correct? So what we will show again using the killing form is that in the semi-simple case, if you have time we will do this, or maybe later, that this actually equals this, because when you take the complement, that complement actually turns out to be 0. That first of all, that there is a complement and that turns out to be 0. Okay. So you see the situation becomes very nice once you grant me this fact. You take an arbitrary element of your semi-simple Lie algebra, you identify it with its image in add, that's a derivation, and which is okay, that for that we don't need the theorem, but so therefore you take its semi-simple and nilpotent parts, they are both derivations, and by the equality they are add of something, so you can pull it back once again. In fact all of these are equalities here, right? And because you can do Jordan decomposition here, you can do Jordan decomposition here. So use this to define XS for x in L, x equals xs plus xn by, what do we say, add of x equals add of xs plus add of xn. Is this clear? What I mean by this? This is really add of x, semi-simple part, add of x, nilpotent part, but they will actually be add of something, and whatever they are add of, those are the things that I am going to call Sen n. Okay. Is one problem with this, right? See, if L itself is, suppose L itself is something like SLN or GLN, suppose that itself is a space of operators, then you have confusion, because you could have Jordan decomposition there itself, and now you have defined, well, you cannot take GLN because I am talking about semi-simple, but if you take SLN, you have Jordan decomposition there, and now you have another Jordan decomposition obtained in some other fashion. Do they coincide? And the theorem is that they actually don't, because Jordan decompositions are preserved under homomorphism. So, Jordan decomposition for semi-simple, keep this in mind, for semi-simple Lie algebras, Jordan decomposition is an intrinsic notion. We defined this here using the adjoint representation, but it is an intrinsic notion. Okay. This should be compared with the algebraic group situation, and there it gets even better. Regardless of for any linear algebraic group, you have Jordan decomposition. There it's a multiplicative one where there is no plus, right? So there you write any group element as a product of, not sum as semi-simple and nilpotent, but product of unipotent and semi-simple. There it's a much more, it's a very important tool because it holds more generally. And here sort of, okay, you can think about why this does not hold here. What is the problem? So you should think of some Lie algebra which is not semi-simple. What would be sort of the opposite extreme of a semi-simple Lie algebra? Or nilpotent, right? So you should look somewhere over there where there is no intrinsic notion. See, the reason why this notion is very useful is because it is intrinsic, it is preserved under homomorphisms. Okay. You start with a semi-simple Lie algebra, I know that homomorphic images are also semi-simple Lie algebras, and so this is preserved. So you should look for a situation where you take some Lie algebra, a nilpotent Lie algebra, and you have an operator which is schizophrenic. Sometimes it looks like one, but sometimes it looks like another one. And I have already sort of indicated where to look. So think about that. When did I start? Okay. So consequences. So I think I will not do the proof of. This. Maybe we will discuss this in exercises. Let me take this chance to go ahead and do something else. Okay, so I'll ask a little advice to the other folks. Since I am done, I could do one of several things. I could try to calculate the Casimir, or perhaps try to do a root space calculation about SL3, let's say, for instance. Or we could stop early. What? So. Root space decomposition for SL3. Yeah, I just want to make a general comment. I do not know about what kind of experience you had today in Vishwanath's lecture, but I still remember how it was for me when I first learned this material, and it was difficult. it was difficult to appreciate what was going on, and much more so how all this stuff about angles and Euclidean geometry in in Euclidean space, how that related to what we are doing over here. But I must say that whatever he did, that is, when you classify something using some other thing, the thing that you are classifying is the more complicated object, and the thing that you are using to classify it is the less complicated thing. So keep in mind that whatever he is doing is the less complicated thing. Okay, and you should think of it like that. It must come, because it is all combinatorial. See the root systems, it's finite sets of roots, right? And then there is the Weyl group, which is a finite group. So those invariants, they are a simpler way to get a handle on the object of study. So the dictionary between the two. So a root, when he drew, it's just a line, right? It's just a vector. How does that root actually come from a Lie algebra? That understanding, you must go over it enough times that it becomes natural. Okay. So one calculation he has already done yesterday, which is SL2, right, where the roots turned out to be 2 and -2. We can think of them as numbers because the vector spaces in question were one dimensional, right. So vector is a number, but you can also say that a linear functional is also a number. So the first calculation to do, which goes beyond SL2, is SL3. So let us try to do that. So calculation. Right, and yet
for SL2 you mean the thing that Raghavan did?
So I don't know, I don't recall. Vishwanath, you did it for SL2, no? Or maybe Raghavan, you did it for SL. You drew the root system, but then so you did that calculation. So shall we start with SL2?
We did do it. You said take the span of H and.
No, that's Raghavan.
Right. Okay. So shall we do that again?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So let's do it for SL2. And in any case, see, this has been said enough times, but really no number of times is enough. This SL2, it really, I mean, it's something that must come in your dreams because not only is it nice, but the whole thing is built out of it. It's like a brick, and we are going to build houses out of those bricks. So each one of those, you should think of it as a brick, and at any time I need, I just take SL2 and use it. So these equations, SL2, x, y and h are small. Let's write down. Hx is 2x, hy is -2y, and xy is h. Okay. See, okay, what I will do is, before doing this calculation, let's lay out the similar thing for SL3. Okay, so the dimension here is going to be 8, right? So I need and it's the adjoint representation that I am going to. So adjoint representation that I am going to look at. So let's write down the eight things. So this is going to be, because I am not going to write down so many matrices, but I will indicate here. So I need notation, right? So H12, what's that going to be? 1 minus 1, 0. That is H12. H, remember, H are the diagonal elements, and X and Y. So we will use X for the. So which way did we do it? X is this one, right? So we will use x for this side and y for this side. So what will we have? H12, H23 and H13. But now H13 is, let's write this down. Is everybody clear with this? Okay. So the diagonal subalgebra of this 8-dimensional Lie algebra is going to be a 2-dimensional Lie algebra, where I have written 3 vectors, but there is this linear relation, correct? Then what will be the other ones? So when I put 1 here and 0 everywhere else, I will call that x, x12, x23 and x13, and there is no relation among them whatsoever, right? And similarly I have y12, y13 and y23. See, really speaking, I could call this x21, right? But I want to stay with the x, y and h. And the very first thing to notice is that the span of h12, x12 and y12 is a copy of SL2. This is what I meant, part of what I meant by saying that this example is built out of SL2s. Okay. So I will say that, so I will write down here SL2 is isomorphic to the C span of x12, y12 and h12. Do you see any other copy of SL2 there? Yes, namely x23, y23 and h23. That is yet another copy. And is there yet another copy? Yes. Right. But somehow that copy, the x and y are different, but the h is related to the earlier h's, right? So in what fashion this relation is there, the root system and that whole thing keeps track of this among many other things. Okay. So there are 3 copies of SL2, but they are related to each other. This is what interrelationship among roots. See, this thing, this is going to say that okay. All right. So what do I do? This is worth writing down again. So if you look at Jordan decomposition, let's look at these elements. Let's look at this itself as a linear algebra. These are matrix, a linear Lie algebra. What sort of elements are H? What sort of elements are these? They are semi-simple elements, and all the x's and y's, they are nilpotent element. So the theorem that I simply quoted, which Raghavan will prove, says that whichever representation you act on, H will always act semi-simply. Whatever operator H is on that space, it will be a semi-simple operator, and similarly all the x's will be nilpotent operators. Okay. This is a result that you can try to prove by hand just for SL2. Okay. One of this was done yesterday, namely Raghavan proved without assuming complete reducibility or it was just by taking a simple module. He showed that x and y always act in a nilpotent fashion. You can try to show that H acts in a semi-simple way. As far as I know, there is no easy way to do this, but you can try to use the Casimir operator, which was that operator given in the exercises, xy plus yx plus half h square, right? And H will always commute with that. So you can try to look at eigenspaces, Jordan decomposition, and try to somehow deduce that it will always act diagonally. And if you do that, then you can use that in turn to prove complete reducibility theorem for SL2. So to appreciate the general proof that Raghavan will do, you can try to do this. Okay. But nonetheless, coming back to our thing, what we are saying is that this H will always be diagonal, x and y will be always nilpotent. So what is a root? Now this is the thing. you look at the diagonal subalgebra. Intrinsically, I can think of it as a maximal subalgebra consisting of commuting semi-simple elements, and the word semi-simple is intrinsic because Jordan decomposition is a well defined thing. Okay. But forgetting general theorems, I look at any representation of so V, a representation of SL2 on which H acts diagonally. So I can diagonalize that action and I can see what the eigenvalues are. Okay. This is for a general representation. So we will, when we study character formulas, we will play that game. For now, we are interested in only one representation, namely the adjoint one. So we look at adjoint representation of SL2 and it's written in front of us. So what are the eigenspaces of H? X, Y and H, that itself diagonalizes the action, and the eigenvalues are 2, 0 and minus 2. Now the eigenvalue 0 I ignore. In general, what happens is that because I take the non-zero eigenvalues, those are 2 and minus 2. So that's why the root system consists of the numbers 2 and minus 2. Okay. Now we will play this same game for SL3. But what happens now? I have to look at eigenvalues of not just a single H, but all these H's. So this is a two-dimensional thing. So I can look at eigenvalues of two operators. But notice that looking at eigenvalues of those two operators is the same as looking at eigenvalues of the whole two-dimensional subalgebra, because the action is linear, right? So if something is an eigenvalue for H12 and something is an eigenvector for H12 and H23, then it will be an eigenvector for a linear combination of H12 and H23 also.
So why are you looking at them two at a time?
We are looking at, because it works, because it is a good way to, is there a better answer? This is a good way to organize things. It works. Let us see what happens. Okay. I don't know if I can give a more articulate answer. Right. So I look at simultaneous eigen. Okay. What is the theorem? That if you have two semi-simple operators and they commute with each other, they can be simultaneously diagonalized. So therefore the whole space, the entire SL3 can be broken up into a direct sum of spaces, each one of which is a common eigenspace for both of these things. Let's do it. Okay. So task. But let me say one more thing, which is again a repeat from yesterday. Take equal to span of H12 and H23, the diagonal subalgebra, and write SL3 as direct sum of V or L alphas for some index set alpha. Now what is that alpha? Remember, these are going to be roots other than the zero ones. Now let's do one thing. There is one eigen, okay, let's first write this. What sort of thing is alpha? Remember, this is as eigenspaces, as sum of common eigenspaces for, that means that each one of the vectors in one of the single L alphas has to be an eigenvector for all the operators here. Let's write down the meaning of that. Okay. So
all meaning it is two there.
But I have taken linear spans. So for two of them is okay, but that means everything. as we increase, there will be that dimension will also. By the way, the reason why there are two linearly independent ones here, that will reflect in your root system living in a two-dimensional real vector space. So let us see. So what is L alpha? It is the space of all vectors x such that everything in H acts on x. Action is, remember, bracket, and x is an eigenvector. So that means some scalar multiple of x, some scalar multiple of x. Now this alpha will depend, of course, on, so I am going to write this dependence, correct? If you recall, we did this exact same thing yesterday in a completely different context when we proved Lee's theorem. And it's a linear function because the action is linear. So alpha lives in okay, right? Let's connect this up with here. So what was alpha? How many alphas were here? So there were 3 alphas, and each one of them was a linear functional on the span of this single vector H, and so each one of them would be completely specified by picking one basis vector, your favorite one, and we chose H, and giving the value of the functional on that, and those values were respectively 2, -2 and 0, which I have not written here, the H. Okay. So that's why there they just turned out to be a single number, because I had chosen a basis. Okay. I had chosen a good basis. Even in general case, I will choose a good basis, but then each root will not be given by a single number. It will be given by a bunch of numbers depending on its values on a number of things. Nonetheless, the whole thing is a functional, right? So is the setup clear? Because then I am going to make you do this calculation. This is a calculation that has to be done. Okay. All right. Now how many alphas can occur? Only finitely many, because this is a finite dimensional space, and one of the and one alpha that you, okay, so you can name one alpha immediately. 0. All these operators in here will act by 0 on what? Certainly on everything in here, right? Because they commute with each other. Okay. Now the fact is that whatever they act by 0 on is only the span of themselves, nothing else. This is the fact that, I mean, if you take all diagonal matrices, then something that commutes with all those diagonal matrices is going to be a diagonal matrix. Okay. So I will separate that out, plus L0, and it will turn out that this L0 is actually equal to H itself. Okay. So let's do a little dimension count here. This is 8 dimensional. This we expect to be 2 dimensional, but that's something for you to check. And so here, therefore, I must find 6 dimensional things. Now do you remember that picture with 6 lines? Each one of those 6 lines is one of those alphas. Okay.
What's L0
L
again?
L0 is where this, so this alpha is 0, that is the 0 functional. That means, so it's the 0 eigenspace, and so that means that all H's commute with everything in there. So certainly this will include script H, but it will not be anything more than that. Okay. So we still have some time, and now you do this calculation. This is something that must be done, and it will not be hard. We already have a good basis, you know. It's just so just to say, so this is 6. This is going to be 6 dimensional in all, and actually each eigenspace will turn out to be, each common eigenspace will turn out to be 1 dimensional. That is why there are going to be 6 different values of alpha. I want you to tell me what those values of alpha are, because each value of alpha will be given by 2 scalars, right? It will turn out that both of those scalars are actually not I mean, as far as we are concerned, those scalars could be arbitrary complex numbers, right, at this stage, but they will turn out to be, see, they have strong integrality properties, right. So you find out what those scalars are, and so you will have a table, right. You will have a table with 6 rows and 2 columns. Find out what those things are.